She stood at the edge of the dune sea where the wind carried the taste of iron and dust. Her ears caught the far hum of broken towers, and her tail curled close to her side like a small moon that needed warmth. She watched the sky until her eyes ached because the sky was the last door he used and it had not opened again. Her name among her people was Silri, and her fur held the color of ember bark after rain. She had shared bread with a human who called himself a friend, and he had spoken in a steady voice and said he would return. Silri kept the sound of that voice in her chest, and it beat like a small drum that kept her moving through the long nights. The city below the hills once held trade lights and music from many worlds now. It was a riddle of wires and glass the war had spilled through like black water and left quiet behind. Silri learned to count the days on the wall of an old landing bay. She marked each sunrise with a small cut and said a soft word to the sky for the one who was gone. The human ship had left in a rush because the orbit lane was not safe and the old gate had begun to fail. He told her to wait near the old tree of white stone because it was where the signal beacons still had power. She waited. 1 day then, 2, then 10. Then a year by the way her people count. Hope was a slow fire that did not go out, and she fed it with small things. She stitched the strap of the pack he left behind. She wiped sand from his name on a thin tag made of bright steel. She spoke his stories to the wind and let the wind carry them. One dawn a small shuttle cut the air and fell toward the far flats. Silri ran until her lungs burned and her paws dug lines in the sand. She reached the ship as its hatch opened, and a young woman stepped out with a hand raised in peace. Her name was Lily, and her face held the gentle look of someone who has seen pain and still chooses care. Lily said she came for survivors and for maps and for any signs of the old gate. Silri listened and then pointed to the hill with the white stone tree. She told Lily about the human who promised to return. Lily did not laugh and did not turn away. She took a small cloth from her pocket and gave it to Silri for the cut on her palm. She said she would look. She asked if Silri would walk with her team because the flats were not safe in the heat. Shimmer and the shadow of drones that still drifted. Silri agreed, and the small group crossed the broken streets that were once markets and gardens. Megan led the group with a scanner and kept her voice calm like still water. Claire checked the sky with a wrist device and spoke the weather signs in a low tone. Nora walked at the back and placed small beacons in the dust so they could find their path again. They were all human women with steady backs and clear eyes, and they moved like a single line of light through a dark hall. Silri showed them the shelter she used and the spring that still gave sweet water under a slab of stone. She told them stories of her mother and of the moons that rose in pairs like shy twins. She told them how the human made a fire with a small box and showed her songs that lived in a tiny glass tablet. Lily listened and asked for more, and each time Silri spoke, the small drum in her chest felt stronger. They reached the tree of white stone by late light. Its roots gripped the hill like old hands, and its pale leaves whispered of years that had not broken it. Under the branches lay the broken shell of a beacon. Silri had cleaned it each week and placed 3 stones beside it. She said the stones were for promise, memory, and return. Megan knelt and opened the panel with care. Inside the wires were burnt, but a tiny light still waited. Claire looked at the horizon and told them the night would be hard and cold. Nora set a heater near the roots and unpacked thin blankets from a gray case. Lily sat beside Silri and asked about the drum in her chest. Silri smiled a small smile and said it was the sound of waiting when you do not let waiting become a cage. They worked by the glow of the heater. Megan whispered to the beacon like a nurse to a sleeping child. Claire traced the old route tables by hand and checked the star lines against her device. Nora brewed a drink that tasted of mint and metal and passed a warm cup to Silri. Lily opened a small book and wrote notes in soft lines because she said memory should live in more than one place. Silri closed her eyes and felt the wind pass over her fur like a blessing. She told them how she met the human beside a wreck where smoke rose in a thin thread. She said he had hair like wet bark and a laugh that pushed clouds away. He shared his last ration and said her world still had music worth saving. He taught her a human word for keeping faith. He said the word was stay at midnight. The beacon chimed one thin tone. Megan leaned close and held her breath. Claire tapped a quick pattern on her device. Nora raised the heater power so the parts would not freeze in the open air. Lily reached for Silri and took her hand. The thin light became a pulse. A path opened in the old code. Megan smiled like sunrise and said they could send a small packet through the gate, backbone that still slept under the dust of the sky. Lily turned to Silri and asked what she wanted to say. With the first packet, Silri thought of the 3 stones and of the word stay, and she chose words that felt like clean water. She said, "Tell them this, we are alive, we have kept the tree we remember," Lily typed. Megan sent the packet. Claire watched the stars and counted the pulse delays with her lips. Nora marked the time and drew a small line in her notebook. They waited. The answer came. Like a bird that had flown far and almost lost its wings. It was short and broken but real. The packet said a name and a place and a plan. It said a human unit had survived in a station past the Blue Belt. It said there was a window for rescue if a ground guide could light the old gate from the planet side. It said a call sign that Silri knew as the name he used when danger was close. The name fell into her chest and made the drum beat hard. They rose at first light and climbed to the ridge. Above the tree from there, the old gate could see them, and they could see it like a ring of bone in the sky. Megan built a simple rig from the beacon and the heater coils. Claire aligned it with the ring and corrected tiny errors until the rig hummed. Like a hive, Nora set mirrors along the slope so the pulse would not scatter. Lily stood beside Silri and asked if she was ready to lead the last step. Silri nodded and set her paw on the send plate. She sent the first pulse. She sent the second. She sent the third and held the plate for 10 long breaths. The ring far above answered with a tremble that moved through the air and through her bones. Clouds thinned as if the sky had taken a deep breath after a long sleep. The gate woke lines of cold. Fire ran around the ring like rivers finding their old beds. A corridor opened like a dawn without sun. Silri felt the word stay turn into a new word in her chest. The new word was Kamaya. Small craft slid out of the corridor and shook as if it was afraid. Then it steadied and came down in a spiral of dust near the white stone tree. The hatch opened and a woman stepped out with a bandage across her brow and a grin that fought with tears. She said she was Kate, and she brought news from the station past the Blue Belt. She said the one with the call sign was alive but weak. He had held his crew together through long, cold, and short food. He had sent the message that kept them from giving up. He had asked that if anyone heard, they should tell Silri. He held the word stay until his hands bled. Silri stood very still. The small drum in her chest changed again. It did not beat like waiting. Now it beat like footsteps on a road that finally points home. Lily and her team set up a field line. To pull more power to the rig, Megan tuned the beacon until it sang in a clear tone that reached beyond clouds. Claire checked windows and mapped the safe angle for a return shot. Nora prepared packs and water and small gifts for those who survived. On the station, Kate brought a data stick that held a message for Silri. Silri took the stick and placed it near her heart before she played it. The message was not words, but a low hum, with notes that moved like river light. It was the tune the human had taught her on a slow night when wind rested. She felt the sound travel through her ribs and out along her tail. She felt her eyes grow wet. When night came, the corridor opened again. 2 craft slid out like shy fish. Men and women stepped down. With thin faces and brave smiles, they carried little and looked around as if the ground might vanish. Lily and her team moved fast with blankets and water and kind hands. Silri searched every face and held in the breath that wanted to break. The last person out wore a coat too big for him and limped like a child learning to run. He looked at the tree and the hill and the mirrors and the small rig that hummed like life, and he smiled. Silri knew the smile and the line of his jaw and the way he held his shoulder when he was tired. She walked to him through the dust and the cold and the long road of days that had lived inside her. He reached out a hand and then stopped as if the road might still trick him. Silri took his hand and placed it over her heart. Where the drum had learned new words, there was no need to speak of stay or come. The words were already there in the skin and the heat and the steady beat that said. Both. Lily watched with a soft look and wiped her eyes. With the back of her glove, Megan leaned against the white stone tree and let out a long breath. Claire turned off her device and listened to the quiet that followed victory. Nora drew one last line in her notebook and smiled at the shape of it. Kate sat on a fallen branch and closed her eyes as if to thank the dark for giving back what it had taken.